Hey kids, I sure do miss you. I wish I could give you a big hug, but this is what we have to do for right now. So what I'm going to do is, just like we always do in our devotion, but I'm going to pick today's devotion and Sunday's story out of our Sunday school. Because I looked over this and the title for today is Good Days and Bad Days. And that's what we're having right now. This time, there's a lot of good things happening. Getting to stay home with family and different things. And I know you're happy you don't have to go to school, but there's also people being sick, but we can pray for these people. But so I just thought this would be a good thing to read, and it happened to be on today. So the good days and bad days. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Do you remember Joseph? And we've talked about Joseph a lot of times in Sunday school. Joseph had brothers who sold him as a slave. Remember, they were jealous of him. Their dad had made him a coat that had all different colors in them, and they were jealous that the dad loved him more than the rest of them, and they just didn't like Joseph. Well, Joseph was taken to Egypt to work, and God gave Joseph success in everything he did. He was soon put in charge of the house of Potiphar, one of the king's important helpers. But just when everything was going well, Potiphar's wife told a lie about Joseph, and he was thrown into prison. And even in prison, though, God was with Joseph. So prison is like jail, and jail is not a good place to be. But wherever we're at, God is with us. And so God was with him and there. So Joseph wasn't afraid. Even though he was in a bad place, he wasn't afraid because he loved God and trusted God and knew he'd take care of them. So 2 other prisoners had dreams that they didn't understand. But God helped Joseph understand the dreams. So Joseph told the prisoners what was going to happen to them, and everything happened just the way Joseph said it would. Now, he couldn't do this on his own. It was only that God told him what these dreams meant. He was using Joseph, just like he uses every one of us for different things. So Joseph told the prisoners what was going to happen, and it did. And Joseph hoped he would soon get out of prison, but he had to stay for 2 more years just because somebody told a lie about him. But he was making the best of everything. Good things on bad days, and Joseph had a lot of good days, even in the place that he was at. Then the king of Egypt, called Pharaoh, had some dreams that troubled him. So it upset him. It was like bad dreams. And so once again, God helped Joseph again to explain the dreams. And Joseph told Pharaoh that Egypt would have 7 years of healthy crops, healthy is good, followed by 7 years of famine, which is bad. That meant it wouldn't rain and the crops wouldn't grow, there wouldn't be any food. So they were having 7 good ones, and then it was going to be followed by 7 bad ones. So Pharaoh was happy to know what his dreams meant, so he let Joseph out of prison and put him in charge of the whole country of Egypt. Have you ever had a good day followed by a bad day, or a bad day followed by a good day? That's the way life is. Joseph had some good days and bad days. He went from being a slave to living in the king's palace. And whether he was in prison or in charge of Egypt, he trusted God. God is with you just like he was with Joseph, on good days and bad, and you can trust him to care for you. So even though he was sold as a young boy, God had a plan for him. And it included being taken from his family, because later he would end up helping his family in those days of famine where they didn't have much food. When they had to go and get food from where he was at, then he connected back with his brothers and ended up having all his brothers come live with him. And he knew who they were, but they didn't know who he was. But anyhow, it all turned out good. But had he not been sold, none of that would have ever happened. So sometimes we don't understand why something bad happens or different situations, but God always has a plan. And a lot of times it's because he's going to do something better, give us something better. So that story sort of goes along with our Sunday school story, which is Paul listened to God. And that's something that's real important, is that we try to listen of what our mind is telling us. Now, sometimes it is the devil trying to get us to do things that are not right. But we also hear that voice to say that, well, my parents told me don't do this because. And so that's the one we need to listen to. And as you get older, you will have this all the time, and you will have it all your life. And it's a decision, a choice that we have to make, to listen to what we know is right, and listen. And if we're not sure, all we have to do is check in the Bible. And if it goes against what God says, then of course it's the wrong thing. But Paul he came after Jesus had died and was resurrected. Paul he's the one that, that God struck him on the way to Damascus, and he was blind. And then he found out that Jesus was God's son, and he used to kill Christians. He used to kill people that love God. But then he came along after Jesus had met with him, and he was telling people about Jesus. And so now Paul listened to God. Paul and Barnabas decided to visit the towns where they had told about Jesus. Barnabas wanted to bring along another disciple named Mark, but Paul didn't want Mark to join them. Barnabas and Mark went a different way. So see, they were friends, but they disagreed. And so they had been traveling together all this time, and then he wanted to bring somebody else in. And Paul is like, no, they disagreed, but they weren't mad at one another, but they parted ways. So Barnabas and Mark went a different way, and Paul chose Silas to travel with him. They traveled to the churches that Paul had started, and they traveled through Syria and Cilicia, Derbe, and Lystra. In Lystra, Paul met a young man named Timothy. Now, we hear about Timothy all the time. And the people at Lystra spoke highly of him. And Paul asked Timothy to join him and Silas. And they talked with the churches. And they told more people about Jesus. So Timothy was quite a bit younger. So Paul was teaching him in how that he could go around different churches and share the news about Jesus. And that's what we do too, is like when Debbie and I are teaching you, we're teaching you, and then you can teach other people that don't know about Jesus. Sometimes you share about children in your class that are on the playground that don't know God, and you talk to them, you ask them, you tell them about church, ask them, do they go to church? And most of all, you're supposed to live in front of them. They will listen to the way and watching how you act and how you treat them more than they're going to listen to what you say to them. So God told Paul not to go to Asia, and they tried to go another way, but again, God said no. Paul listened to God, and during the night, Paul had a dream. A man from Macedonia stood up over him saying, "Come to Macedonia, we need help." So Paul and Silas and Timothy left immediately. They knew God wanted them to tell the good news about Jesus with the people in Macedonia. So what happened here is when they separated, it didn't end up being a bad thing, because then when they went separate ways, they reached more people in different areas. And sometimes, like I said, something happens and you think it's a bad thing, but later on it ends up being a good thing. And I have shared with some of you, and some of the newer ones don't know, but Debbie and I both moved here from big city in Chicago when we were going in 7th grade. Well, I hated leaving my friends. I remember driving in the car and all my friends standing in the street just crying, and I was too. And I thought, why do I have to move? When I went from a big city to the country, and I hated it. But now, if I had not come here, I wouldn't be your Sunday school teacher. I wouldn't have Kenny for a husband and Eric for a son and Brooklyn and Colton for grandchildren if I would have got to stay in the city. I would have never known any of you. And so it all turned out to be a much better thing. So God knows what he's doing. And in the good and the bad, he is always with us. And we don't ever have to be afraid. Sometimes we are afraid, but we don't have to stay afraid. We tell God we are, ask him to help us, and then forget about it. Go on about something else. And I told Brooklyn the other day, we've been reading the daily bread. She wanted to take the book home, so I go up there every day and she reads to me. And so we talk about the stories in there, and and then there's a lesson in every single one of them. But we have to listen to God, and we have to still pray to Him. And sometimes when we are afraid, just like I said, tell Him we are. And if we pray for anything, ask for anything, I told her, I said, I start thanking Him that He's going to give it to me right after I ask Him. Because if you don't believe, then you shouldn't even pray. If you don't believe as God can do it, then there's really no sense. Just like our story about Peter when he was in jail and all his friends were praying at the house. And then the angel came and the chains fell off of him. And he got to just walk out of there, went to his friend's house and knocked at the door. And the girl went and answered it. I think her name was Rhoda. And she answered it and she's like, and told her friends, Peter's at the door. And they're like, he can't be, he's in jail. But they were all together praying that God would let him out of jail, but yet they didn't believe it when he showed up. And so that's what I was trying to explain to her. When we ask God for something, we are to believe Him for it and thank Him for it. And if it's not good for us and He doesn't let us have it, we should also accept that. So I hope you got a little bit of something out of our story today about listening to God, and that there is going to be good and bad. We can't always have good, but God is with us in the bad. And we will get back to normal and get to come back to church. I will get to see you and hug you again. I just miss you and I love you. See you next time.